what struck me was that in these entirely Christian villages, these ancient villages, there was a sense of security. And I met many displaced people who had come up from Basra and from Baghdad to settle in the Nineveh plains. And there I heard some absolutely heart-rending stories. I met a young girl who had lost her parents and her sister, murdered. I met a widow who had lost her husband and was now caring for a disabled son, her husband murdered in an anti-Christian pogrom. I can only describe it as that. And then there was a very quiet lady sitting there, very cool, collected, listening to these appalling stories, and she finally came and told us her story. Her husband was a deacon. On the way back from church, he was killed, blown up in a bomb, and then her daughter disappeared, and at that stage she broke down, burst into tears, and we couldn't carry on the interview, and we subsequently heard that she'd never seen that daughter again. Can you imagine the anguish of that lady to lose her husband, killed in a roadside bomb, and then to lose her 18-year-old daughter, disappeared, probably murdered? And this is only 2 or 3 or 4 stories of so many terrible, terrible stories of ordinary people who just have no interest in politics, never showed interest in politics, who just, in the suburbs of Baghdad, wanted to get on with their own lives and have now had to fled to what they consider to be some sort of safe haven in the Nineveh Plains. I give away the honourable gentleman.
Thank you, Mrs. Humble. I congratulate the honourable member in achieving this very worthwhile debate, and the member has outlined some horrific stories. He will be aware of the case of Asya Ahmad Muhammad, sentenced to 5 years imprisonment at the age of 14, after fatally stabbing her uncle in trying to defend her family who were being attacked for converting to Christianity. Would the honourable member agree with me that the doctrine of treating non-Muslims as dhimmis, is the terminology that's used, or second-class citizens, is unacceptable? And does he believe that there is a duty on the government to apply more pressure, not just to Iraq, but to other Islamic countries, to end this stance regarding their own citizens?
Well, it's interesting the honourable gentleman makes that very important intervention. I had a conversation with an Orthodox priest, and I just asked him, perhaps rather naively, what would happen if somebody converted from Islam and joined his congregation. I'd just been to his church. What an extraordinary, moving service it was. The whole village turned up. Entirely bare. These churches are entirely bare, no icons, no ornaments. And the priest gives a very simple service in Aramaic. Aramaic, the language of Jesus Christ. These are the last speakers of Aramaic. Anyway, I asked the priest a question afterwards when we were having a coffee with him. I said rather naively, what would happen if somebody wished to come and join your church from the local Muslim community? He said, yes, they could join my church today, and tomorrow they would be dead. There was no doubt about this. This is no exaggeration. You simply cannot evangelize in Iraq, and indeed most Muslim countries, and if you seek to convert, you will be killed. And I say, the honourable gentleman made this intervention, these people who have suffered like this are genuine religious refugees. There is no way in which they could possibly be considered economic migrants. And I do believe that we have a duty of care. But our greatest duty of care is not to try and pick up the pieces when they flee, as they are. This ancient community is fleeing to New Zealand, to Greece, to Australia, to America, to this country. Our duty surely is to help them stay in their own country, which is what they want to do. And how soul-destroying it was to go around these villages and talk to these old men and women who generation after generation had ploughed and tilled this land. And they wanted to stay. They had no choice but to stay. But the young people, they all wanted to go to America. How tragic that was. And when they go to America, I know from my own experience, because my wife comes from Russian extraction, we know this, that once you leave your country, you lose your roots, you lose your language, and this language, the language Aramaic, will be lost forever. So this is not just a humanitarian disaster, it is a cultural disaster of massive proportions. Now, there's one thing that we can do. I had these conversations, as I said, in the mountains, and I do say to the honourable gentleman who intervened on me earlier, I've got nothing against Kurds. They suffer terribly. They're also under huge economic pressure. But in Kurdistan, we have what is effectively an independent state. You never see the Iraqi army there. You never see the Americans. It's all run by the Peshmerga. It's effectively an independent state. And there is ample evidence, and we can provide the Foreign Office with all the evidence they need, that in at least 58 villages, the Christian population has either, the village has either been partially or wholly expropriated by Kurds. Now, it happens in a very subtle way. It doesn't happen in the way that Saddam used to do by bombing. It's not as cruel as that. There's no chemical attacks or anything like that. Nobody's suggesting that. But I saw it myself in a village. I was with an old man, and some kids from the next village came along. You have a dominant Kurdish population all around. They were starting to take a bit of the vineyard. He tried to shoo them away, and he told me that when he did that a couple of months before, he was beaten up. So it happens very gradually. Then they go to the courts, and the courts agree, yes, you've got the title deeds to this field, your family have been tilling this field for generations, and then the court makes a judgment, nothing happens. So it's a very gradual process in Kurdistan of these villages gradually losing a field here, a house there. But of course, they have no effective representation in the government. But there is one place in Iraq where they could have some kind of safe haven, and that is the Nineveh Plains, where they are not, they then have a majority of the population, but they are the single largest ethnic group, and they are happy to live there happily with Arabs and Yazidis. I must admit, before I went to Iraq, I never even heard of the Yazidis, but they are, again, a small religious ethnic group within Iraq, and we want to try and keep them there as well and protect them. Now, in the Nineveh Plains, the Assyrian Democratic Movement, which, as I say, has 80% of the vote, is campaigning for a 19th province. There are already 18 provinces in Iraq. The Christians are not interested in breaking up Iraq. They're not interested in their province succeeding. They just have to have one province where they feel that they will, working with the local Arabs, with the Yazidis, have some kind of real say in the governance of that province. That would give them that sense of security, of belonging to their own country. And as I said, it was interesting that when I was talking to so many of these refugees, where did they go to? They either left the country altogether, or if they wanted to stay in the country, they went to these entirely Christian villages in the Nineveh Plains. They may not stay there. They may come for a time, and then as things ease, and I'm sure the minister will reassure us that things are getting better in Baghdad, they can then return to Baghdad and Basra. So I very much hope that when the minister replies to this debate, he will at least keep an open mind on the creation of a 19th province around the Nineveh Plains. I suspect he may say that there are divided councils on this. It's difficult to get the Baghdad government to agree. We don't want to ghettoise the Christians. There's always 101 reasons for not doing something. But surely we should listen to the voice of the Christian people and to their democratically elected representatives. My honourable friend talked about democracy. That's what they want. They want this 19th province. So that at least we can make a start in this 19th province